All right, good evening and welcome to the Norwood Conservation Commission meeting tonight, October 16th at 7:30 p.m. If anyone else is recording tonight's meeting, just let us know now. All right, as we've done in the remote and hybrid environment, I'll go down the list of Conservation Commission members for an opening roll call, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is here. Catherine Walsh is absent tonight. Kalima Mustafa Whitberg.
Here.
Anil Prasad.
Here.
Kelsey Quinlan.
Here.
Excellent, thank you for that. We'll start off tonight's meeting with our public hearings, first of which looks to be off Norton Drive, a request for determination of applicability under Norwood number 2024-14. This was continued from September 25th, 2024. Project description is a proposed two-lot subdivision of two land parcels with proposed construction of a single-family house, driveway, utilities, and grading in the buffer zone of a bordering vegetated wetland. Applicant is John Glosser, represented by John Glosser Engineering. And I think on this one, we have a request for continuance to a future meeting that has now had its date established on April 16th, 2025. So if it would please the commission, we could have a motion to continue this to April 16th, 2025, 7:30 p.m. Will that be here at the senior center?
Yes.
Tentatively anyways.
Maybe because we can't establish that for sure, we should say it will be virtually. Because that's important, so that it definitely can occur.
All right, so then if it would please the commission, we'd be looking for a motion to continue to April 16th, 2025, 7:30 p.m. to be held virtually.
And there's one.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, there's one more aspect where we ask the applicant for an extension to continue to respond to their filing until that time. So I can write a memo of such, but Julie is here on behalf of her filing.
Okay. So do we need to modify the motion to account for what you just described?
I don't think so, because we are continuing it to a specific date
At a
and time,
specific time.
and virtually. And just
Virtual location.
part of this is that the applicant would also grant an extension for us to make a decision on their filing.
All right. The applicant's with us this evening. Is there anything else to add
I don't
to
think
what
so.
Connie's described?
Just requesting the extension and be back April 16th.
All right, so I guess the motion would then be, third time's a charm, to continue this to April 16th, 2025, with the understanding of the applicant has made a request. What's it?
A request for continuance to, this is a RDA.
There was something with an extension you wanted to,
They're granting us an extension.
the applicant is going to grant us an extension until that date. Yeah, okay, so that's the motion.
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Quinlan. Thank you, Mr. Prasad. As we've done in the remote and hybrid environment, I'll go down the list of Conservation Commission members and ask you to just verbally state your position on this vote, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is in favor. Aye. Kalima Mustafa Whitberg.
Aye.
Anil Prasad.
Aye.
Kelsey Quinlan.
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's a lengthy continuance, one of the longer I've seen. Okay. Next up on the agenda, also under public hearings, is going to be Vanderbilt Ave. Looks like a request for determination of applicability under Norwood number 2024-19. Applicant is the Trails Advisory Committee, represented by Joseph Greeley of the Trails Advisory Committee. Project description is proposed installation of a temporary boardwalk and temporary water crossings in the riverfront area, buffer zone, and wetland resource areas. I don't see Mr. Greeley here this evening, but I'm certain that we have some pinch hitters, as it were.
Sure. I'm Joe Barrett. Joe's at another meeting, so
No problem.
Lee and I are here.
Always happy to see you.
Last week.
So what are we up to?
So back in the spring, you guys approved, I think, 7 temporary crossings, might be 8 that we did. We're looking to do another temporary crossing. This one's down at the end of Vanderbilt, near the end of the cul-de-sac. And it's basically gonna be a plank. It's just same design as, the general design as all the other ones. Plank going across the water crossing, 4x4 underneath it. Rebar pin coming in at angles, 45-degree angles to pin it down so it won't lift or rise. And we'll keep that there until we come back for a full-blown permit for a real water crossing at some point.
How long have those other crossings been in place?
About a year and a half, anywhere between I'd say 6 months to a year and a half.
How are we doing with the rebar pinning and just the general maintenance and survivability of these structures?
They've all held up except the end of one. Then I noticed, and I think it's because we're only putting in 2 feet of rebar, which isn't, we hit it, bang it in at an angle, that's not a whole lot of depth.
Yep.
There's a couple of places that we had concrete blocks and they were sitting on that, and we, at that point, we had what we call a rebar nail. It's a 2-foot or 1-foot piece of rebar on top of like a 4-foot piece of rebar, and we just pound that through the plank to hold those down. But the only one's been loose so far.
Not bad.
Yeah.
So generally, is the team pleased with the performance? This was a kind of a new design, right, when they were deployed, when we talked about this?
Well, yeah, initially we started going with that concrete block route, just putting planks on top of it and then like a little paver on top of that to hold it in place. And then we ran into our engineer, Jerry Hawcroft, who does this for professionally and does it up at Acadia National Park. And he said, no, just do 4x4 sleepers, pound the rebar in an angle. Won't lift or rise, like I mentioned. And so now we only do things that way.
I think it's pretty good for 18 months or so for only one of them to have required any type of significant maintenance.
Yeah, in that spot, the ground was probably just a little muddier there, you know,
Yep.
when we put it in. And,
Okay, and this is just one additional location that we're
Yep.
describing tonight?
yeah,
Other questions or comments from the commissioners?
I don't have any questions. I think it's great that you've connected so many of the trails with this, newer type of bridge crossing.
yeah, it's, all the trails are all areas that is prone to flooding because it's Norwood, right? It's a table, it's flat. And, so these really help when we get a lot of rain. And when you wouldn't normally be able to cross a trench or a swale, now you can cross it, so
Yeah.
we get a lot more use out of it that way.
In the past, if it wasn't like frozen conditions, really largely inaccessible, right?
Frozen or droughts, like
Yeah.
a summer like this summer, it's, I think, the second driest summer since they started reading the gauge down at Green Lodge.
Yeah. Yeah, making it far more accessible, I think, is a wonderful thing that we've been up to here. What do you say about this, Carly?
So this is the installation of temporary water crossings in order to do reconnaissance
Yeah.
and create a more permanent
Right.
trail and crossings.
Mhm.
And so just to clarify, is this 3 total crossings or just 1?
This is one crop right now, but there are a couple of areas right beyond it that can puddle up and fill up. So when we watch it a little bit longer, we may want to drop a couple more planks right beyond that.
Okay. Got it.
Right now, it's all dry, even where this is.
Okay, and they noted in their application that they're not going to remove, fill, dredge, or alter the resource areas. That the activities are temporary in nature and necessary for planning and designing purposes. So it seems to me, like looking at what they've done in the past in their application, this is gonna be negligible impact. So it seems to me that we could support this project without any requests for changes or, it seems to me it could be a negative determination of applicability if the Conservation Commission is comfortable with that.
Forgive me, I know I often forget about the remote participants, so just chime in if I'm being,
Yep.
you have anything on this one?
No comment. Thank you.
Very good. Do we have anyone from the public here tonight or remotely to speak in regards to this public hearing? All right then. Well, I think that the history of this activity has been very positive. I think hearing about the minimal need of maintenance of the other crossings that have been established, and just generally understanding that I think that the conservation team and the trails team both have a similar vision for the accessibility and the passive recreation opportunities that lie in concert with this type of effort, right? So, as an individual, it would certainly please me to see this move forward as readily as possible. So I think that if it would please the commission, we could have a motion to close the public hearing and issue a negative determination of applicability.
I'll make that motion, I agree.
I'll second.
Thank you for that. As we've done in the remote and hybrid environment, I'll go down the list of Conservation Commission members and just ask you to verbally state your position on this vote, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is in favor. Aye. Kalima Mustafa Woodberg.
Aye.
Emil Prasad.
Aye.
And Kelsey Quinlan.
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Thank you for being here tonight. Tell
Thank
us
you,
if
folks.
really we've missed him.
Alrighty, thanks.
Okay. All right, next up on the agenda, also under public hearings, we're gonna move on to 10 Willett Parkway. This is a request for determination of applicability under Norwood number 2024-20. Applicant is Timothy Collins, represented by Timothy Collins. The project description is proposed removal of 6 pine trees in the buffer zone of bordering vegetated wetlands at Ellis Pond. How are we doing tonight, sir?
Good, how are you?
Very good. If you just identify yourself for the record and dive into a description of your intent, we
Yep.
can talk about it.
Timothy Collins, 10 George F. Willett Parkway. So we're basically looking to take down there are 6 white pines that line the back left property line of our house. They range from, I believe it's 44 feet to 75 feet from Ellis Pond. So Kylie was nice enough to come out and take a look at it. We're just looking to, in my opinion, they've all grown into each other. We're looking to clean it up. They're very tall at this point as well. So we'd like to remove them. The intent is to replant with something native that'll be environmentally friendly around the pond. We honestly haven't gone as far as what that would be with. Kylie did provide us with a list of appropriate trees and or plants, shrubs, etc. I did have some email conversation with her today. More than happy to work with her to make sure what we choose is appropriate and it's covering the space that we're looking at.
Very good. And you said that they're white pines, is that right?
They are.
Yeah, pretty fast growing. Carly, the location of these trees, I don't know if we have a map or a Google Street View that we could pull up, or alternatively, just your description from your site visit. I think when you and I discussed this agenda item, it was mentioned that one of the trees might be close or inside, close enough that we're kind of in the no disturb, no build, inside the 25 foot or something, right? So I think it might be worth either looking at a figure or aerial image or something and talking in particular about your thoughts surrounding that one tree in particular and just the project proposal in general. Yeah,
Okay, hold on one moment.
and take your time. You said these are pretty big at this point, pretty mature trees.
They're, I would guess, between 30, or they do range, but the tops are about 30 to 40 feet high. And they, as I said, they've kind of all grown into each other.
And forgive me because I think it was mentioned, I think Kylie had the info, but the diameter of the trunk, how thick are these things? Like,
Again, varying in range. I think the largest was 56 inches, the trunk, and the smallest was just below 3 feet. It was like 2 feet 10 inches, I think.
Do you mean the perimeter?
Yeah,
what
sorry,
do
that's a
Like
circumference,
the
sorry.
circumference, yeah.
Yeah, the circumference. That's fine. When you said
Sorry.
that number, I assumed we weren't talking about redwoods or something, so I picked up what you were putting down.
Circumference.
Often when we talk about trees, the DBH or diameter of the trunk at breast height
Oh,
is
gotcha.
a very common metric used to reference the size of the tree.
Gotcha, sorry.
No, it's totally
That I
fine.
do
I don't
not.
expect you to come equipped like an arborist or something. But yeah, it's good to understand, in particular when we talk about replacing trees. I'm sure if you've already looked into this, you're aware that the cost of anything alive and acclimated to New England in particular, not to get into the details of it, can be costly.
Yep.
And the more mature or larger and healthier that the planting is, the more costly it becomes. And whenever we do replacement, you can always think about replacement in like a per unit, like one-to-one kind of capacity. But when we think about the benefits of tree and canopy cover, you know, when in and around wetlands, the way they help manage the stormwater or waters in and around the wetlands, it's, you know, it's smart to think about like the size of the replacement as well, right? If we take down these massive, healthy, large diameter trees that are drinking water, you know, multiple gallons per day kind of thing during storm events or otherwise, and they were replaced by saplings that were twigs, you might even see those plantings fail if they weren't capable of, you know, keeping up with like the setting or what have you. Now, sure, making an investment like this, you'll do a little bit of research in concert with the native species list of plantings that Carly provided, but yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about that because I don't expect you to become armed like an arborist, and I think it's good to talk, educate, and just discuss some of these things because, yeah, I think it's relevant. So it looks like Carly's pulled up some imagery and maybe the locations, Carly, of the trees that we're talking about. What do you say here? What are we looking at?
So Timothy provided this. This was based on an image that I had given him to show him where the buffer zone is. That's the orange line. The trees are along, if you're looking at the house here, it's on the right side of the house. It's like a line of trees. I think what we are considering is the performance standards for each of the zones, each of the buffer areas from the wetland that surrounds Ellis Pond. And so, for instance, the no-build area has a certain set of sort of like restrictions. And so the tree that's like 44 feet from the wetland would be within that area. And so, for instance, in the no-build area, which extends 25 feet to 50 feet from the resource area, which that tree would be within, it says no construction or removal of vegetation is allowed. So that should be for consideration by the Conservation Commission for the trees that are within that particular area. I think it would be helpful to know how many trees are within 50 feet. Is it just one? Do you recall?
I know we did the measurements that day, and it was, I want to say it was just that one. The second one might have been right at 50. I know you,
Yeah, we should take a
we
look
did take
at
those
the notes
measurements.
from there.
What was the total tree count again? Forgive me.
6.
6 trees. And there's one for sure that's in there.
Mhm.
A second one that might be just on or outside the footprint, perhaps, to review your notes.
Yeah.
yeah, I'm fairly certain the other 4 were outside. of the
Certainly
50.
well
Yeah.
outside that, yeah. So we'll say 4 or 5 trees are certainly outside that. Maybe one's in question there, and one is certainly within. The one that's within, based on the performance standards described, I think it'll be tough to approve that one tree in particular.
Mhm.
Now, outside of that 50-foot, I think we have a little more leniency in what we could approve, and that a planting, replanting, or what we're kind of describing might be achievable. Is that true? Carly, could you cite, do you have something in that regard?
For the area, the tree filter zone, which is, I believe, 25 feet to 100 feet from the resource area, it says no more than 50% of the tree cover can be removed. Tree cover is measured for the purpose of this section as the basal area of trees with a 6-inch diameter at 3 feet above ground. In terms of being in a buffer zone, so that's anywhere from 0 to 100 feet from a resource area. It doesn't specify that no vegetation can be removed.
So
it
it's
would
really
seem-
that tree, forgive me, tree filter
Tree filter zone.
metric that we have to be considerate of when it comes to the other trees. Now, to make sure I understand the way that translates, Carly, when we're talking about some replanting, that replanting would contribute to offsetting that reduction in basal area, I think was the statistic mentioned. Okay, so it sounds like that the other 5 of the 6 trees could quite handily or readily be replanted with a native substitute from found another native that was lurking that wasn't on Carly's list that would be appropriate. That seems like it would be reasonable and probably achievable. We'll have to see what the sentiment of the commission is. But I think that one tree, you might be out of luck.
Gotcha.
Just to keep it real with you.
No, I understand.
Is that one of the older ones, or,
I think they're all about the same age.
okay, but bigger, or,
That one's actually smaller. The one furthest away is the two furthest away are the largest. The ones closest to the water
okay,
are actually smaller,
okay.
Okay.
or skinnier. I'm not sure what the
So
correct.
maybe
word.
that plays out okay if one of the small trees has to remain due to the performance standards and regulations that kind of restrict what we can allow in that area. At least it's one of the smaller trees
That is gonna
and,
say.
with some other plantings that are more appropriately sized.
Yeah, and there's a couple other even closer that weren't in consideration of this. That there's also there's a bunch of bushes and shrubs as the path bends around the pond. That again, totally out of consideration for this. So they kind of blend in with that, anyways.
Nice for privacy.
It is. It is.
Okay, questions or comments from the commissioners?
So, I hear that you're looking to remove 6. How many are there in that general area? I know and not like a specific count, but you say that there's some others and some bushes, so it's already pretty vegetated?
Yeah, so there's at least 2 other smaller,
Okay.
I believe they were white pines. Then there's a larger one right on the corner of the path, which, forgive me, I don't know what it is. It's not a pine. Carly, do you remember what?
We'll kind of see the canopy cover along that whole line of the house, right?
I mean, you had birch in there,
Yeah, that's
you
a
got
good mix.
deciduous, it's got a variety.
I want to say the large one on the edge of the path, I want to say it's a maple.
Yeah, you got maples too, yeah.
So, sorry, to answer your question, in the specific area we're talking about, there's probably, I'd say, about 10 total trees.
So be removing half the trees, but replacing them with native species replacements. And ideally, some consideration for the largest, most mature replacements, reasonably achievable and procurable. Sometimes you get what you get, because, not every nursery has a remarkable array of, several species, all in several stages of growth or what have you,
Yeah.
right? So I certainly encourage you to look for plantings that have been locally acclimated. I know that when we've dealt with some of these things, if it's been like from a nursery in Florida or something, it doesn't do very well in a New England winter kind of
Most of
thing.
us,
So I digress. I'll leave that to you. Neil, do you have any questions on this one?
I do not.
I have another comment.
Please.
I know we're talking about native, which is great. Has there been any discussion about trees that are better suited for high water table? Something that could, when it does grow to maturity, could take on more potential water, like a swamp tree. That might be something to prioritize over just, obviously trees fare better in different conditions, something more suitable for that for specific type of area.
Yeah, I think when I was out there, we were chatting, I gave him a link to Doug Tallamy's list of native species that are useful for pollinators and moths and butterflies and so forth. We did talk about moist soils. Yes, he and I can talk about like appropriate native species and talk with your arborist, and yes, I think we can come to a decision together about potential species he can have on his palette of possibilities. I think we want an equivalent basal area that he's gonna put in, so think about the girth of the trees being removed. We wanna sort of replant similar girth in total of trees. Like, they don't all have to be that large when you put them in, but maybe together they'll equal the same.
That was going to be one of my questions.
Yeah.
Thank you, you just answered it. So it doesn't have to be, say 5 come out, it doesn't have to be 5 the same size, I could put 7 in. then-
Yeah.
Smaller, more manageable kind of thing, yeah,
Yeah.
certainly.
Trees tend to, I think, do better if you put them in when they're younger as opposed to when they're older.
Yeah. And understanding that, one or more of the trees might be massive and it could be tough to fully replicate that, but if I think
Yeah.
we're meeting what is it, tree coverage, tree
Canopy.
to 100-foot.
Tree filter zone.
Thank you. As long as we're meeting the requirements of the tree filter zone, there was a percentage I think Carly had cited earlier, then I think you're probably on the right track here. Just, yeah, to Carly's point, replicated by basal area, but just so that we don't end up with like twigs in place of titans kind of thing.
Yeah. No, taking these out will eliminate some privacy with the neighbors, so we'll definitely want to be putting something.
Yeah, certainly, right? Yeah, absolutely. Other questions or comments from the commissioners? Kalima, anything?
I think one other thing to be mindful of is because you're near wetlands, you want to make sure there's no heavy machinery going through wetland. And if you disturb soil, it should be stabilized as soon as possible, which, you know, if you're making a hole, you want to fill it back in. But I know you said you're going to be removing the trees and planting
Mhm.
around the same time. So it would involve erosion controls potentially if you're not doing it like same day, for
Mhm.
instance, and we can go over that
Okay.
as well. Just because you're so close to a resource area.
Mhm. Okay.
Is there anyone from the community, online, remotely, or in person, to speak in regard to this agenda item? Okay. Recommended next steps, Carly.
I think if the Conservation Commission is comfortable with it, it could be determined a negative determination of applicability with conditions, that the applicant and the conservation planner work to develop a list of tree replacements together, and confirm that erosion controls are appropriate, and used if needed. I think that's what I would suggest.
Okay, so the request was to remove the 6 trees, so I don't know, do we need, so we would only be approving 5 of the 6 trees, right? Because the one that's certainly inside the 50-foot, we can't approve.
So, I can look at our list of trees, and I can head out there too to confirm that the only trees that will be removed will be those outside of the 50-foot.
So that would be the condition, that's how we can navigate that. Okay, so we would have a condition that only trees outside the 50-foot are removed, the condition that native plantings pre-approved by our conservation agent, Ms. Rockland, are planted, right, and approved prior to planting.
Mhm.
And as Carly mentioned, we want to make sure there's a condition related to all appropriate and necessary erosion controls. Any other conditions that we
The basal area of
Sure.
the planted trees matches those removed.
matches or within
In
some
aggregate.
reasonable tolerance?
Yes.
Something to that effect? So within, so the basal area of the replacement plantings
Equivalency?
is equivalent to and meets the performance standards of the, I'm gonna forget it again, the
Tree
tree.
filter zone?
Thank you. Anything else you can think of, Brennan?
No.
Okay, so if it would please the commission, we could have a motion to close the public hearing and issue a negative determination of applicability with the conditions that have been just described by Ms. Rockland applied.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Thank you for that. As we've done in the remote and hybrid environment, I'll go down the list of Conservation Commission members and just ask you to verbally state your position on this vote, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is in favor. Aye. Kalima Mustafa Whitberg.
Aye.
Anil Prasad.
Aye.
Kelsey Quinlan.
Aye.
Excellent, thank you for that. Thank you for being here in person tonight and
Thank
being
you,
so
appreciate it.
patient as we talk this out. I think that this is a good project.
Yeah, thank you, appreciate it, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right. That's gonna bring us to line item number 4 under public hearings. It's gonna be open space by Meadow Street and the Ponset River. This is a notice of intent. I don't believe we have a DEP file number 4 yet. It's gonna be under Norwood number 2024-18. Applicant is the Trails Advisory Committee, represented by Joseph Greeley and the Trails Advisory Committee. Project description is proposed installation of a permanent wooden walkway over a drainage swale and border and vegetated wetland, buffer zone, and riverfront area of the Neponset River. Mr. Greeley's at a meeting tonight, so I believe we will have another substitute.
Hi again.
Oh, we do have the DEP file number, forgive me. It's going to be DEP file number 251-0565. And if you just re-identify yourself for the matter of record, Mr. Barrett.
Joe Barrett from Norwood Trails Advisory Committee.
What do you say about this one?
What do I say about it?
Yeah, what do you say?
I watched the meeting last week, last month, that you guys had, where basically it sounded like it was good to go and was gonna be approved. It was just missing the EP number, so this was kind of a formality. So the Eagle Scout who's building this one was here for that meeting and did the presentation, and he's not here today because, like I said, it sounded like this was.
Yeah, no, I think you've got it just right. And this was another activity performed along with the support of Mr. Hopcroft, right?
Yes, yeah, he designed the bridge.
I really appreciate all of his contributions to things like this.
From our standpoint, it's like having a gift from God. I mean, what's the likelihood you're gonna have a civil engineer who taught at Wentworth, who designs bridges all summer long at Acadia National Park year in and year out?
Imagine paying a
Lives in
couple
the town.
$100 an hour for all this work. Jeez,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, what a blessing indeed. Yep, you're right about that. All right, so we have a DP file number now. I've just cited it. We've briefly reviewed and described the project. We actually have a new member with us tonight, Kalima. So I think it just might be, I know we've like really aggressively paraphrased the project. Can Kalima vote on this tonight, having missed
That's interesting.
past hearings? I don't know how many times we've talked about this and what the exact rule is.
I think it's the Mullen Rule where she would have had to watch a video of the last Conservation Commission hearing and sign a form.
Yep.
I did watch it, but I did
She
not
did
sign
watch
it
it.
for me.
So she could sign it though, or we could have the three other members vote on this, and Kalima could recuse herself if she prefers, whatever's comfortable.
Well, she did watch the video.
So you just needed to sign the form.
Mm-hmm.
So I think with that in mind, why don't we just talk a little bit more about it, since I think our newest member will be voting tonight, and I just want to give her the consideration of it. So
Okay.
she's aware of what the heck we're talking about.
Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying, that the sentiment is that we were
Yeah.
largely waiting for the DEP file number, and that the commission prior to this was pretty well poised, I think, to vote to move forward with this.
Mhm.
So the project description that I have at my disposal, Kalima, is installation of a permanent wooded walkway that's 16 feet long by 3 feet wide. This is built by an Eagle Scout. This is an Eagle Scout project, or was
Yes.
it an already?
It's an Eagle Scout project.
Okay, so this is an Eagle Scout
Yeah.
project, like it is kind of necessary to become an Eagle Scout, right? That's how that
Correct.
works. Yeah, very good. Local engineer Jerry Hopcroft assisted in the engineering design of this. He's helped with a number of designs of this nature. Has also helped, as Mr. Barrett mentioned, design solutions for Acadia National Forest and other like larger outdoor passive recreation solutions, which is incredible to have at our town's disposal. And it looks like this is going to be crossing a man-made drainage swale. The swale itself, the bridge is 16 feet long. What's the actual, there's got to be some of that's got to be on the embankment, right? How big is the swale actually?
Well, right, I don't have measurements in front of me, but right
That's
now,
okay,
there's an 8-foot plank going across it now,
Yeah.
sitting on concrete blocks.
So maybe 6 feet wide or something like that?
Yeah, I'd say that's about right, yeah.
Okay. And this is on land owned by Norwood Airport. This will be used as part of a footpath along the bank of the Neponset River. And this ties in, you correct me immediately, Mr. Barrett, if I misspeak, but this ties into the larger trail network.
Right,
that has
the
been
Tyout Trail.
Tyout Trail, thank you. It has been worked on painstakingly for, I guess, several years conceptually, and now
Yeah.
more in the real world space that will create a circuit. How long is this circuit of the Tyout Trail?
There's 19 miles, it's like 8.5 miles on one side of Route 1 and 9.5 miles on the other side of Route 1.
That's incredible. So a 19-mile circuit that kind of loops a significant portion geographically of the town.
Yeah,
And frankly, I think that maybe, recently as 5 years ago, this was almost considered like a pipe dream, right? Like, the idea of being able to interconnect all this stuff, overcome all of these permitting issues, the engineering challenges of these crossings and beyond. It's a lot to manage, and Mr. Greeley, Mr. Barrett, Mr. Leach, who's in the audience tonight, and a number of other passionate volunteers of the Trails Committee have been working tirelessly to make this like formerly pipe dream come true, right? So it's pretty rad, I think. And I love to see what you guys are doing. And certainly as an individual, love to see the support from the commission as a commissioner and as a member of the community that enjoys the passive recreation opportunities you guys facilitate. So, Ms. Mustafa Whitberg, that's what's been happening with all of this. So with that in mind, what do you think, Carly? Is there anything else highly relevant? There's some stuff about CMRs and other reference materials that are in the notes. Is there anything that is noteworthy to review, Ms. Kalima?
I don't think so, not
She's
at
seen
this
the
time.
past materials, but, you know, just.
I think we have to make sure you get up to visit the site. It's a gorgeous area. This path will allow more people to see these views. Views of the Neponset River, views of like wet meadows and stands of like, white trunked poplar trees and birches, and it's really stunning out there.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
awesome. That space over by the airport and behind, I always call it the hot dog stand trailer, and
Yeah.
that is just my favorite space, I think, in the whole town, honestly. So,
Um,
yeah, very cool.
More to see out there.
The only thing I'll add is at the last meeting, Mr. Greeley showed us what the potential alternatives would be, and it was apparent that it really wasn't possible. They met that requirement as well.
So there was some consideration for the alternatives analysis, and
Yeah.
your opinion is that there really wasn't much of an
No,
alternative once they were evaluated?
Exactly.
Okay. Anyone from the public, online or physically present, to speak in regard to this hearing tonight?
I'd like to add one more thing for the benefit of the new member of the commission.
Thank you.
So we've also, we talked about the entire trail, but the whole concept has been approved by the Board of Selectmen, the Conservation Commission.
Town manager.
Town manager, who am I leaving out? Board of Selectmen. We got Community Preservation Act funding for coming up with funds for these bridges, so the Community Preservation Act process supported it as well. And town meeting, all of town meetings supported it as well.
I'm not sure I've heard a single naysayer, if I'm being honest and fair with you, but
Yeah.
I'm a big fan, so who am I to say? Carly, what are recommended next steps on this one?
I think that if the commission is comfortable, they could issue an order of conditions with standard conditions, special conditions.
No special conditions? Just the standard order of conditions?
Yep.
Okay, and then Kalima, on this one, you can feel free to vote as long as you sign that form that Carly will have on deck for you. Or you could also recuse yourself, given I think we have enough members for a quorum to vote, if that makes you more comfortable, so no pressure either way. But with that in mind, if it would please the commission, I think we could have a motion to close the public hearing and approve the filing with the standard order of conditions that Ms. Rockland has just mentioned.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Thank you for that. As we're done in the remote and hybrid environment, I'll go down the list of Conservation Commission members and ask you to verbally state your position on this vote, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is in favor. Aye. Kalima Mustafa Whitberg.
Aye.
Anil Prasad.
Aye.
Kelsey Quinlan.
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Thank you again, Mr. Barrett.
Thank you again.
Always a pleasure.
Likewise.
Let's see what we have next. This is gonna bring us to line item number 5. It's going to be 750 University Ave under notice of intent, DEP file number 251-0564, Norwood number 2024-16. Applicant is James McCullough of Solway Norwood, SCOD LLC, represented by Matthew Moynihan of Tetra Tech Inc. Project description is proposed construction of a battery energy storage system and bordering land subject to flooding in riverfront area. I'm not sure if we have any of the project applicants or representatives with us tonight, but I think that's fine then. We did receive a request for continuance to our next meeting that's going to be held on November 6th, 2024 at 7:30 p.m. here at the Senior Center. So, if it would please the commission, we could have a motion to continue this to November 6th, 2024 at 7:30 p.m. here at the Senior Center.
Make that motion.
I'll second.
Thank you for that. As we've done on the remote cabinet environment, I'll go down the list of Conservation Commission members and just ask you to verbally state your position on this vote, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is in favor. Aye. Delina Mustafa Lidberg.
Aye.
Anil Prasad.
Aye.
And Kelsey Quinlan.
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Next up on the agenda, line item number 6 under public hearings. We're getting there. This is going to be 320 and 330 Union Street. Notice of intent filing under DEP file number 251-0558. Norwood number is 2024-09. Applicant is Andrew Gibbons, represented by Matthew Smith of Norwood Engineering. Project description is proposed construction of a residential driveway, reconstruction of driveway, completion of house construction with work in riverfront area of an intermittent stream, buffer zone of bordering vegetated wetland, and isolated vegetated wetland. Not sure if we have a project representative here on this one tonight. Nope. Similar to the last, we have a request from the applicant for a continuance to our next meeting on November 6, 2024. So if it would please the commission, we could have a motion to continue this hearing to our next meeting, November 6, 2024 at 7:30 p.m. here at the Senior Center.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Thank you for that. As we've done in the remote hybrid environment, I'll go down the list of Conservation Commission members and just ask you to verbally state your position on this vote. Starting with myself, Stephen Washburn is in favor. Aye. Catherine Walsh is absent. Lena Mustafa Lidberg.
Aye.
Anil Prasad.
Aye.
And Kelsey Quinlan.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you for that. That's going to bring us to the end of the public hearings for tonight, and we can move into the next portion of the agenda, wetland issues and updates. And we're going to start with the enforcement order update related to the investigation of Hawes Pond oil sheen with W.T. Rich. We have team member or members available to take the podium and talk online. You good, what's the name? Thank you.
Hi, I'm here. Can you all hear me?
Loud and clear, thank you. Yep.
Hello.
If you would just introduce yourself for the record and then let us know what your perspective is on the update and state of affairs. Ms. Rockland can chime in and update us. I think there's been a lot of effort on this.
Sure, yeah, so we spoke about 3 weeks ago at the last meeting. Honestly, not a ton of updates since then. We did get the live file of the scoping of the drainage lines that was done prior to last meeting, so that link was shared with your team there. Other than that, from a construction perspective, actually not a ton of updates. I believe the way we left the last meeting was we were just waiting for that file to be sent, and that should hopefully have answered the last of the questions, at least from how the construction site is tied to the ponds perspective. Just to reiterate what we've discussed at the last meeting, the drainage lines that are shown on our construction plans that are from the town's historical data, and as part of our SWIP plan that is filed, what the scoping of the drainage lines proved was that those drainage lines do exist and they do outfall to the brook where they're shown on the plans. So again, the footage of that has been shared. There was this, I believe about a week ago, an email from your, I forget, Carly, I don't remember if it was you or Alex, but that there was more oil seen on the pond. But we did review the entire project site that day. It wasn't around a rain event. There was no oil spills on and no known outfalls from our site that was going into the pond. So I believe the latest and greatest was Carly worked with your team to, well, we did actually, let me confirm that we did also confirm with Mark Ryan and the team that there's some lawn mowing happening the day or two before. And we did notice that that had actually happened the last time there was an oil sheet on the pond, so we just didn't know if that was correlated at all, but so Mark did confirm there was no leaks or anything from his lawnmower. But other than that, I believe the latest and greatest is Carly's team took samples of the sheen on October 8th. And I don't believe we've heard anything since then. So that's the latest from our end.
Awesome, thank you very much for that. Carly, why don't you dive right in then and pick up where we left off, describing that sample for the speaker.
So on October 8th, Ryan Manning, the assistant director of DPW, and I went out to the site and we took a couple of samples of the oil sheen. Right now it's getting assessed by a laboratory. It's called a TPH characterization, total petroleum hydrocarbons fingerprint assessment, which will help us understand what type of petroleum was released, so we can better understand where it might have come from. And I am waiting for some follow-up from DPW about the drain lines under the field, which were uncovered by the scoping to have tree roots growing into them and some sedimentation inside. I'm curious as to what maintenance we can expect from the town, because it's not within the limit of work of the Copley construction site. I have also spoken with the Assistant Director of Community Development, Ilex Jones, who would like to show W.T. Rich the outlet that she believes goes into Plaza Pond from the construction site. And in order to do that, we might need to lower the water level in the pond to see if we can find that pipe. So I think some follow-up needs to happen around that. I need to have some more discussion with Alex and with W.T. Rich around that, and also with Mark Ryan to figure out feasibility. And
Yeah, sometimes I think we can just do water right around the outlet too, with a small thing or sandbags, depending on how much we're talking about. That might be a lot easier than, depending on how much elevation change we're talking about, right, on a long term. But, particularly, I'm sure we'll do it accordingly. So, is it fair to say, Carly, that we're quite satisfied with the collaborative effort from W.T. Rich in all of this, and that we're really kind of just waiting to see the TPH fingerprint data to understand what type of material, when it may have been released, and how that might compare to other surrounding samples and background data before we just sign off on close the enforcement order up. But really, I don't think that, by the way it's been described to me, there's anything we're actively waiting for W.T. Rich to do. It's just that we want to see the results of this sampling before we close this up. Is that fair?
yes, I would also like to learn more about potentially looking at the pipe in the pond, if there is such a pipe.
It's interesting. I mean, I'd be curious if there's any type of wet or dry weather outfall sampling associated with that outlet. If it's draining into one of our receiving waters, it might be part of our stormwater program. And it'd be interesting if there have been samples at that outfall historically, even if they're years old at this point. It would be interesting to compare to the newest sample that was taken that's certainly burdened by the petroleum product, to further compare and contrast what's happening there.
Yes, it seems like from the scoping that was done and the look at the blueprints, there are no outlets into the ponds, but there's some memory of there being an outlet into the pond from a year ago. So I think WT Reach has done what we asked. They scoped pipes. I think that there's just one more angle to take a look at, and then to wait for the oil sheen sample to come back.
The only other thing I'll just add to the discussion that was discussed a few weeks ago that I forgot to mention is we also opened every structure that was installed on the project, which includes existing structures, and we have photos in those just to confirm there weren't any other random tie-ins to any structures that are tied to the structures we've scoped, to make sure there aren't any other drain lines. And then the DPW also provided their plans to confirm there was no other pipes in that area as well. So that was one of the questions that we did confirm. We did send those photos of the structures. So we are happy about Carly to meet with Ilex and your team down there, and if there is an outfall that we find, and if we need to scope something else, we can. We've gone basically from our end in, and then also confirmed we could not find any outfalls in the pond. But if something is identified and we can help look into it, we're happy to do so.
Right, thank you.
Questions or comments from the commissioners on this one?
What's the timeframe, Carly, that you expect to get results back?
I am not clear on that. I shouldn't think it would take too long. Ryan Manning's office managed the submission of the sampling to the lab, so I haven't heard straight from them when it will come back.
Yeah, to your point, I think that a lot of these things have some temporal sensitivity. You can't just keep the sample on ice forever. I think things can start to break down and change in the composition. So usually 72 hours or so maximum before they test it, and then it might be a week or two before data comes back. They like to charge extra if you want a rapid turnaround on stuff like this. So, yeah, okay. So maybe, and how long ago, that was submitted on the 8th, is that true?
Yes.
Yep. So it's already been a little over a week since the sample was taken and submitted, so likely in the next week or so, I'd imagine we'll have some results. Great. What do you say, Neil?
I don't have any comments.
All right, I don't think we need any motion on this one, Kylie. We all just have an understanding that we're waiting for that sample to come back. Should see it in the next week or so, and then we'll huddle up, reconvene, and just make some final decisions about closing this out or what direction the investigation might take next, whether that includes further efforts from WT Rich or more of an internal thing that the municipality pursues. Okay. Thank you for being here tonight.
You're welcome. Can I just confirm, would you need me to attend the next meeting, or should I just hang tight and just assume it's being worked on, or will you keep me posted, Carly, or how do you want me to go from here?
I'll keep you posted.
Okay, I'll attend if needed in a few weeks, and otherwise I'll just keep an eye out for any emails or any phone calls.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. All right, next up on the agenda, also under wetland issues and updates, we'll talk about the emergency certification that took place at Moderna related to the paving of a fire road. I think this might have been requested from public safety or otherwise. Carly, do you want to describe what happened here for us?
So we have representatives from
Sure,
Moderna
yeah.
and PAR.
Yeah.
The Norwood Fire Department requested that Moderna pave the fire road so that they would be assured of a plowed, usable access to the building to fight fires and save lives. The permeable fire road that was constructed, sadly, didn't take not enough grass germinated along the road so that the soil wasn't stabilized. And I think the fire department felt plowing wasn't assured and the stability of the surface wasn't assured, and they couldn't risk that. So they've asked for it to be paved, and part of that is filling out an emergency certification, which allows this life-saving activity to be done within a short time frame. I know they wanted to do it before winter sets in and while asphalt is still available. So the idea is they submit an emergency certification request. I signed it, and then it gets ratified by the Conservation Commission. And then the applicant submits a notice of intent for their project to the Conservation Commission. But Ilex and I have been working with them on their plan, so we've seen it develop as well. So just so you know, there's been input from us and review of their plans during this time. But I signed the emergency certification, and then they started on Monday the 7th at 7 a.m. and they have 30 days in which to complete the project. And they can only do the portion of the project that meets the order of the fire department. It can't be like an extensive project beyond that. That's an overview.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Joe Weed with Power Corporation. I'm a site civil engineer. We have a presentation. I don't know if we want to go through that or. They're both the same too, so either one.
I will try the other one. This doesn't look like it's doing much.
Yeah, there was a PowerPoint and a PDF.
Oh, there it is.
There it is.
Okay, so now, let's see. Apologies, I don't know if this is working. Let's see.
Anil, are you able to see the PowerPoint presentation on screen? Oh,
Yep, I am.
are you seeing our video session, or are you seeing just the PowerPoint presentation?
I'm seeing the PowerPoint and then I see you all as different. Yeah. I see everyone. And then, yeah.
So I think, how about now? Do you just see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yep.
All right, very good. So I'll just keep it on the screen, and I think you can hit the, my eyes are so bad, if I do like present, play, start, something like that at the top of it.
Also on the bottom right, Carly, next to that scale, there's that little slideshow, two more to the right. That, one
This?
more. Okay, that works.
Looks good to me. So I think as you click, it'll progress the slides, basically. Yeah. Yep.
All right, so, yeah, again, I'm Joe Weed with Power Corporation. I'm also here with Paul Orr and Matt Kilpatrick from Par, and then Lou Chitisi from Moderna Therapeutics. So this is a familiar project probably for you guys, and thanks Carly for going through the major points. I'll just kind of quickly scroll through here. So the purpose of this was requested by the Norwood Fire Department for the protection of public health and safety concerns that they raised. And we're asking for this work to be authorized, or was authorized under the emergency order certification pursuant to Regulation 310, CMR Rule 10.06, 1 through 5. And then a couple of the major design developments we have listed here are the removal of the grass paver system, as Carly mentioned earlier, replacement with approximately 10,000 square feet of impervious asphalt, just your standard asphalt. And then in order to mitigate that, we're also incorporating new stormwater management features to mitigate that additional impervious area. And just a quick schedule to bring you up to date where we are. So on 10/1, there was a meeting with Norwood Concom, the planning department with Par and Moderna. And that was really to go through the urgency of project, why it was needed, and kind of map out a review and approval process and how the work could be completed in a timely manner before the winter. The urgency is to get the road in prior to winter, which would be before the asphalt plants start closing down, so. And then on 10/4, October 4th, there was a site visit with Concom, PAR and Moderna, and that's when the emergency certification was authorized. And Carly said on the 7th, they started construction, and the 30 days end of day would be November 5th, would be the end of day for construction to be completed. So we're about a week into construction, a little over a week. Got about 3 weeks remaining to go. And then a couple other dates here in the future that we're anticipating is PAR will submit a formal NOI to Concom and then come forward for a public hearing on this in January. So this is a little difficult to see from here, but what we're showing here is the drainage and utility plan. Essentially the asphalt, which is the shaded gray area, that's the fire access road. It has the same footprint as the grass pavers. It's 20 feet wide, except the only thing that's changed on this is the grass pavers were infiltrating, impervious, and the stormwater was infiltrating. So this asphalt system, now we're collecting the stormwater, treating it in 2 underground systems, and then discharging it to the wetland out to the east. So we've got, I believe on the southern portion, there's a asphalt berm that's directing the flow off the fire access road towards catchment area, and then it goes into an underground infiltration system. There's one on the bottom, and then there's another underground infiltration system to the north. They both combine into one manhole structure and then discharge out towards the wetland. So the discharge is, I believe it's outside of the 50-foot buffer zone. There is some work within the 50-foot buffer zone, and there's quite a bit of work within the 100-foot buffer also. We're trying to minimize, though, the amount of clearing that's in the buffer zone just to the outfall area, just so we can install the outfall, and then we would put that, mitigate that, plantings around there. There are reductions. We've gone through the stormwater calcs. The designs have all been completed. There are reductions in peak flow and volume, 1 through the 100-year storm events. There's all the water, all the runoff from the pavement is infiltrated during the 10-year storms, and there's no discharge from the underground infiltration systems, which collects all the runoff from the pavement during the 10-year storm. I think that's it. Maybe one more slide. Yeah, and then quite any questions, but then we added the rest of the plans here if you wanted to go through anything specific to take a look at. That's kind of where we are to date with this project.
What's the area of the paving footprint?
I believe it's roughly 10,000 square feet. I know it's 20 feet wide. Do you have an idea of the length of it?
What's up?
An idea of the length of the road? The length of the road.
Um,
No, it's 10,000.
It's like around 600 feet,
600 feet.
total length of the road. we ended up looking at approximately 10,000 square feet of additional impervious area over that length, which caused us to have to redesign to actually design a stormwater management system for it.
You said we're inside the 50, is that right, with some of this?
There is a little bit of work within the 50-foot buffer. We're completely outside of the 25-foot wetland protection area, and then a lot of the work's in the 100-foot.
By work, are you saying the stormwater features or the asphalt?
Within the 100-foot, the asphalt's within the 100-foot buffer. The stormwater features are, I believe, there's some of that within the 50-foot. And can I approach the,
Yeah.
kind of point out some things here?
I can move this around, just let me know.
Okay. Actually, if you go to one of the next drawings. This one will work. So we have here the wetland border, or the wetlands were flagged here, and then we have the 25-foot wetland protection zone is the first ring here, and then the 50-foot buffer zone is the second ring. So this little area here is where some of the 50-foot stuff, and this is one of the underground infiltration systems right in this area. Then we have on this outside ring is the 100-foot buffer zone, which goes all the way to the building up here. So a lot of this asphalt is, or this roadway is already in the 100-foot buffer.
I have a question. I want to preface it with a statement that, of course, like, as an individual, I support our public safety team and appreciate that these concerns are surely valid, but the question comes to mind. It's a fire access road, right? We know going into this that big, huge fire trucks are going to drive on it. Was the pervious paver installation not engineered to adequate fashion to support the weight of these
It was.
Because that seems crazy to me.
It was engineered to meet the design, and that's what it's intended for, was fire road. The issue there, I think, was more the concerns with maintenance of the road and clearing snow from the road. Is my understanding with fire.
Who in Moderna clears, maintains, and is on private property, right? They're the ones responsible for maintaining the mowing and or snow removal activities on this alignment?
Yeah, they contract. I don't know if you could speak to that, Lou.
Yep. We use a company called ProScape. They do all the maintenance, snow plowing, grass, etc. from Moderna. By coincidence, they also installed the green paver road down at Amgen, down in Rhode Island. So they had experience with it, and they were familiar with the plowing. They basically had recommended that we keep it so far off the ground so it doesn't, especially after we just built it in November, December. They recommended we don't touch it for the first winter and let it settle, also let the grass grow. But during the first snowstorm, fire department wanted us to clear it, so we did. And during that cleaning and clearing operation, it caused the structure, the plastic that actually held the fire truck in place, to vibrate or actually settle in some instances. And that was one of the issues that came up. So when they walked it in the spring, they noticed some of the road had settled, some of it hadn't. We had requested that we hydroseed it, let it take time to germinate and grow additional grass. So we brought in some more loam. We put also a different type of hydroseed in it, had like a tacky substance to it so it wouldn't wash away. And it started to fill in, but during the course of the summer and et cetera, it didn't grow in as fully as the advertisement showed as a lush, grassy surface. And at that point, I think it was August, they recommended that they wanted a more plowable surface and recommended that we dig up the existing and put in a paved roadway.
Forgive, repeat that last part? About who recommended digging it up and?
Fire department.
Oh, the fire, yeah. And did that come to light as part of an emergency response or
No,
a fire
no,
inspection
they-
kind of thing, or?
The feeling was that between the way it settled and that the concern was it wasn't plowable, that in the winter months when ice and snow build up, et cetera, that going forward, the concern was that the fire truck might lose traction, get stuck, and they felt that the only reliable way to guarantee life safety was to have a pavable roadway installed.
What's coming to my mind, Carly, is that to me this sets kind of a precedent in which our department is requesting that we don't permit or approve this type of paver installation for fire access roads. And it eliminates what circumstantially could be a great way to avoid more pervious surface coming into a project. And in this project in particular, I can't help but wonder, geez, when these pervious pavers were used, what was the big picture in the stormwater calcs and stuff associated with this? Would it ever have been originally approved? When it comes to fire access and public safety, that gets a little dicey or whatever, but would it have been approved if it was originally proposed as 10,000 square feet of impervious surface versus the 10,000 square feet of pervious surface? And yeah, it tastes foul to me. So I think that I guess a question is, do you agree that the sentiment of the fire department as expressed is that they don't want to see this done anywhere? Or is this a site-specific request?
I can't speak for the fire department, but I feel like they are skeptical of fire roads built in this fashion as being workable for their trucks and dependable in the winter.
So I think that's a
Experience.
very important takeaway for the commissioners, and that not just for this situation where we're gonna lose 10,000 square feet of impervious versus pervious surface here. We need to understand that in the future, we probably shouldn't be permitting and approving this type of installation in a fire road unless we expect it to become impervious in the near future. Because we certainly don't want to have these after-the-fact situations come up where a year or two after something's been approved, something that would not have been permittable at all due to the stormwater calculations, pervious versus impervious improvement standards and otherwise, are getting approved with something like this, and then 18 months later, it's getting turned into 10,000 square foot of blacktop. So outside the realm of just this in particular scenario, I think it's important for the commissioners to understand, is that the sentiment and request of the fire department, that we no longer approve this type of installation? Because we should keep that in mind in the future, because this kind of, after the fact, oops, there goes 10,000 square feet, hurts. What do you say?
With the specific situation and timeline, I think public safety is obviously the most important thing, but I agree with your sentiment. I think it's a lesson for the commission to learn about permitting this type of feature in the future and keeping that in mind.
What do you say out there now?
I have a question for Carly. Do we have guidance from maybe or what other towns have done in the state for this kind of permitting?
In terms of emergency certification or? in
Yeah. What would the fire department recommend?
Well, they recommended that the road be paved, so currently it's, construction is ongoing to get the road paved, with the stormwater treatment aspects included. And then we're just gonna follow the protocol, so they have 30 days in which to do the construction, and then
Mhm.
to submit a notice of intent to the Conservation Commission with a more detailed plan.
Okay.
And then we go through the notice of intent process.
Got it.
Now, how does that work after, it's not really a notice, if it's happened already?
It's like an after-the-fact filing, I think is what it's referred to.
Okay.
I wonder if the applicant could speak more to the plan that they're going to submit, or if there's more that they plan to do, or maybe learning about that would be helpful for the commission.
Certainly.
Sure. Well, we'll, I believe it's a formal application. We'll go through the whole NOI. We'll submit, well, I have C drawings, but at that time it'll probably be record drawings. And a stormwater report that'll go along with that, and then for the wetland, I'm going to speak to the wetlands aspect of it.
Sorry?
The wetlands aspect of what's going to be submitted for the NOI.
Yeah, so the NOI will be, basically the plans that the commission is seeing here this evening are the same issued for construction set that we first sat down with Carly and Ilex, was that October 1st, I think? There's been no change. We up to this construction set. So what you see here will be part of the notice of intent filing within 30 days of the expiration of the emergency certification. So what you see before you right now with minor field changes perhaps, as happens on every construction job.
Every construction
No,
job.
and I mean minor. We almost had a major one, but we averted it. But everything is going along great. Weather has cooperated, with the construction schedule. We will be finished in time. We have no choice but to be finished, by end of day on November 5th. And then we've already done some preliminary work on the notice of intent. We're just waiting till the very end to get this all nailed down and get it to the commission within 30 days after.
Does anyone, this isn't a public hearing, so Carly, what else do you say about this? What are our next steps? I think that we're looking, do you need a formal motion and vote to support or ratify the emergency certification, or do you just need signatures?
I believe I just need signatures.
Okay. And then we'll see the filing when the time comes, at the date that was mentioned. Any other questions? Anil?
No questions for me. Thank you.
All right. All right, thank you for the update and keeping us informed of what's going on here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, that is the last of the wetland issues and updates line items. That'll bring us to the Conservation Commission business portion of the agenda, starting with the ever-anticipated Concom meeting schedule for 2025. I took a quick look at this, Carly. I feel like you did a great job in trying to dodge some of the holidays and things like that, right? It's always tough, like the day before or after a holiday and things. I think we had like the July 3rd last year that was a little rough. I think this looks good. I do see you scheduled a meeting on my birthday, September 10th, which I may or may not come to, but if I don't have plans, I'll probably come hang out. So this looks pretty good. Do you have any questions that you want to present to us about the schedule, Carly, or is it generally just informative? This is what you came up with. You were thoughtful and considerate about the holidays to the best of your ability, and this is kind of what we're looking at. In fact, we've already continued the hearing to one of these dates.
Yes.
Yeah.
You'll see that some of them are not 3 weeks apart. Sometimes they're 2 weeks apart or 4 weeks apart in order to avoid holidays.
Okay.
So I'll have to put them in my calendar, I can't just reoccur.
I can't just say to the three reoccurring, darn, okay. So we'll have to custom schedule.
But this has to be like the Conservation Commission has to indicate if you approve or not of this
So we
meeting
can
schedule.
vote to approve the schedule or something of that nature. I had already looked at this. Does anyone have comments, questions, or concerns about the schedule before we have a motion to approve?
The 2025 calendar, I'm trying to look to see, I may have missed it, I apologize.
Where is that in the queue now?
If you look in QNAP under Concom business,
Mhm.
it should be in there, let me see, I'm just gonna double check. Yeah, it's the Word document. Hold on one moment. Let's see.
Here.
Sorry.
That's fine, I'm sure I'll be fine with it. We can move on.
Kelsey, Khalil, any questions or concerns about the schedule?
I was just curious, Carly, so what's the timeline for application submissions prior to a hearing? I'm just amazed at how
Really,
far
it's
it's been.
3 weeks before.
It's 3 weeks, wow. I don't have any comments, so.
It's nice to give us some opportunity to review materials and stuff. It's tough when you catch a late breaking email and I just feel guilty if I can't look at it. You know?
Absolutely.
I'm just shooting from the hip when we show up, so. Okay, if it would please the commission, then we could have a motion to approve the 2025 Conservation Commission meeting schedule as presented by Ms. Rothman.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Excellent, thank you for that. As we've done in the remote and hybrid environment, go down the list of Conservation Commission members and just ask you to verbally state your position on this vote, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is in favor. Aye. Kalima Mustafa Widberg.
Aye.
Anil Prasad.
Aye.
Kelsey Quinlan.
Aye.
Excellent, thank you for that. Next up, Conservation Commission business line item number 2, proposed revisions to Conservation Commission fee structure. Take it away, Carly.
So there was a desire to make the fee schedule for conservation permitting more efficient and simple, and to make it less expensive, to basically sort of bring Norwood's fee schedule more in line with our surrounding communities. And so that's what you see before you. Let's see, maybe I'll pull up the files on screen. Sorry, I'm not quite sure how to do this. Let's see here.
So check on the upper right.
Okay, so I should, okay. So the idea is that the fee schedule should reflect the amount of work that's put in by the conservation planner to processing the different permitting applications. And to make it so that there's less complexity in figuring out the fees that are associated with the different permit applications.
I think something that is worth mentioning that I found kind of interesting about this is that I think maybe 5 or 6 years ago now, under former administration, departmentally, and a different chair and largely different composition of the Conservation Commission. In fact, I may be the only surviving member from those days. Then it was suggested 5 or 6 years ago that the fees were inadequate and that they were too low and that they needed to be revised. So at that point, commission members, it's my recollection that there were a few more involved than others. I think that there were a lot of cooks in the kitchen, but there were a few very prevalent opinions about how this should go, that the fees were inadequate, and they were, I think at the time, significantly increased. I would be curious if there's any record of that transaction when we changed the fees 5 years ago, just how different the change was comparatively. So I find that interesting, and I don't think that it's entirely surprising that with different administrations, there's different opinions and impressions. I even feel like when this was discussed 5 or 6 years ago, it was framed that that fee was covering the cost of like our administrative assistant and the agent and others that were involved in some of the review of these materials. So when I saw this, I thought right away, well, geez, like, that's wild that 5 years ago we increased the fees. Now 5 years later, we're talking about decreasing the fees. And I looked at this with Carly, and I did agree that there's an incredible amount of like nuance to the way the fee is calculated. Circumstantially, there's a calculation of like square footage in and outside of resource areas. It's pretty crazy to me. In fact, the amount of effort that one would have to put in, and then like you would appreciate that then you're looking at plans and worried about like area calculations and projections and distortions of large sites and things like, who knows how accurate that really is. And on very large sites, just doing some quick like napkin math when Carly and I were chatting, there were like extraordinary figures coming up. I was just calculating math on like simple parcels that I knew and I could look at on a GIS map quickly kind of thing. So I can see the concern. I can see I think what I believe is an entirely valid point about how irritating it can be to calculate this reliably, accurately, and fairly, right? But I would say that when I reviewed the proposed changes, I was kind of startled and worried about the significant, like in some cases, I think 70–80% reduction in fee when it comes to multi-unit residential and commercial and the way it's been revised and simplified. It suggested that internal staff, I think maybe intern or co-op level staff, did a little research and digging around, and I think that their general findings were that we are more expensive than surrounding towns. But I would ask for a particular comparison. I'd actually like to see some of the towns that touch us, for example, and what their fee schedule is directly compared to our new proposed schedule. That would be helpful for me. It would be helpful to understand where we came from 5 years ago. Because I kind of feel a little weird about ping-ponging back and forth every few years, like raise the fees, lower the fees, raise the fees, like what's going on, right? And I also had some concern that it was presented that this would help bring consistency to the amount of monies that we could anticipate coming through the fee schedule. And while I agree with that, I think we could consistently expect a significantly reduced amount of monies coming through the fee schedule. And it made me nervous, right? Because we have things we're committed to financially, like the maintenance of the ponds and other things. And while that shouldn't like dictate some tyrannical level of fees where people aren't proposing development because they don't want to pay that permitting or application fee, or we're suggesting that, with all respect to your contributions, Carly, that Carly's time is worth like $1,000 an hour or something, that's wild, right? So I think that personally as an individual, I would feel much more comfortable before we moved to approve or deny this suggestion if we just saw a little bit more information, in particular specific comparison of the proposed rates to real rates of surrounding towns, communities that touch us, pick 3 or 4 of them and just compare the rates, right? And I'd also like to understand where we came from 5 years ago. What did we change the fee schedule from? Because it's just a little strange to me to flip-flop back and forth. So I would ask the commissioners to be considerate of some of the points that I've made surrounding this topic. Because I think that generally this is probably a good idea, but I think we should just be considerate of it and avoid like every few years drastically changing back and forth. The fee schedule, I think that while it can't dictate the fee schedule entirely, we should be considerate of our budget and the kind of defunct nature of the treasury role right now on the commission. It's really hard to turn to a treasurer and say, is this going to be okay or not? So that's how I feel about this, so I'm curious what you guys have to say.
Thanks for sharing. So what I'm understanding is we're trying to accomplish two things at the same time. Making it more simple to come up with the fee, because it almost sounds like there's like a time fee to make the fee, you know?
Almost, yeah.
And then to be more aligned with the surrounding communities because our fee is higher. And so this is a very new subject to me, and I'm very interested in learning more about it. I haven't really participated with this board on these types of discussions, frankly financial at all. So I would be wary of making any recommendation, not really knowing where we've come from, how we project our projects in the future, what the goals of this commission are in the future. But I do want to say I do support making the fee more simple and transparent.
Yeah, you really need a protractor or a GIS map with a good projection and area tool to sort this out, or you're in big trouble, frankly.
Right.
It's like very frustrating. Yeah, and you get like a weird parcel, a weird site shape. It's like a starfish or something, and you're trying to calculate the area of that without modern technology. I can't even fathom, right?
If I could also add, I do think having a few of the surrounding towns is a good metric, but I don't think all are created equal. I think Norwood is very different from 4 to 5 of the surrounding towns. So I would encourage, not to name anybody, but a Dedham or something that has just a little bit, you know, tighter boundaries, more nuanced, I don't want to say complex, that's not very fair, but that requires, you know, looking into soil quality. You know, we're not just talking about woods here. So I do think that adds a layer of complexity to your job, and I think that should be considered as well.
To add, I think, yes to everything that you guys have said, in terms of looking at data across the 5, or looking at what the costs have been over the last 5 years and the surrounding towns. I'm very curious to understand what do the fees drive in terms of what is that collection spent on? So is it spent on salaries? Is it spent on the conservation fund?
Would you mind if I spoke to that?
Please do.
Okay, so our Assistant Director of Community Development, Alex Jones, she responded to this discussion earlier when I asked, and Alex noted the money we raise from fees is not tied to or related to the money allocated in the budget each year for conservation land management, because we were talking about, will we have enough money if our fees go down to manage our ponds and our lands? And Alex continued, the annual land management budget comes from the general fund, which is funded by town management each year using a combination of revenue sources, including fees, taxes, free cash, etc., for all of the routine operating expenses of town government. Our department costs, including land management, are a part of the services town government provides, just as the DPW, manager's office, health department, IT department, etc., are not expected to fund their budgets through fees. Alex noted, legally the amount charged in fees should correspond to the administrative burden of processing applications, rather than subsidizing the separate COMCOM focus of land management. And continues on, but
So where does the fee money go when it's collected?
let's see.
Yeah,
It says, hold on one moment. Alex noted, separately, money the town receives from the state fee does go into the Wetland Protection Act Fund, which the commission can choose to use for purposes related to implementing the Wetlands Protection Act. That fund hasn't been used in several years and continues to accrue over time. The state fee is not going to change, as it is set by the state, so that account and gradual accrual will remain unchanged.
Something that comes out of this conversation that I have to express is just incredible amount of frustration in the dysfunctional treasury role, right? We're talking about funds that have been dormant and not used for several years. And that this is kind of the first I recall it ever being discussed, and I feel like a functional treasurer would be bringing this information to the commission and disseminating it periodically so that we didn't have funds collecting dust for year over year or whatever. But what else do you have, Brad?
Couple of other questions. So leaving aside the fact that we haven't touched the funds in a few years, are there any, in the next year or two, do we have any proposed projects that we will need funding for from this account or whatever it is?
I think this is all up for discussion.
It would also be helpful to understand what's in the fund, if that's available.
So I think that we should do more learning about fund expenditure through the Conservation Commission, and I think we should look at these surrounding towns. I feel like there's work to be done before the Conservation Commission says yay or nay for this fee schedule.
You touched on all the things I'm thinking about, yeah.
And a question on the role of the treasurer. So Stephen, you mentioned that do we have a town treasurer?
I was
I wasn't
speaking,
clear on that.
no, it's fine, Anil. I was speaking to the role of Conservation Commission treasurer. So we have traditionally had a chairperson, a vice chairperson, and a treasurer. I don't know the time frame. Carly could definitely tell me, I think, but I think it's been a couple of years since the departmental consolidation and the reworking of the way the budget was managed. But Anil, prior to this restructuring, interdepartmental restructuring and budget merging and munis account adjustments and otherwise, the treasurer would meet periodically with the department head and would collaborate with them regarding anticipated, in concert with the agent, would collaborate with them about what we had available for funds, what our anticipated expenses were, and would help like chime in heavy-handedly when things like this came up, because they would be so well-versed from the repeated exposure to the department head and agent in conversations specific to the treasury. So when things would come up like, oh geez, the community garden wants to add another row of plots, do we have money to help pay for their effort at Indene, right? The treasurer would chime in and they would have some insight into that. If we were to ask, boy, we want to add Guiled Pond to the aquatic plant management or do something like that, they would be ready to say like, okay, here's the projected cost, here's the available funding. And sometimes I can recall a former Commissioner Peter Bamber would be ready to rock with like suggested mechanisms of funding to help support some of those initiatives. So there was a few years ago a departmental restructuring, financial restructuring that changed the way things were handled in the munis system, the way things were handled from like a managerial perspective, I guess, at City Hall, Town Hall. And in the wake of that, the aftermath of that, I think for the duration of this time, I've served as the chairperson on the commission, and my impression has been that we just have really struggled to find our footing in the direction and new redefinition of how the treasurer should function. And at the same time, this consolidation departmentally was happening, financially, updates to the munis system and otherwise. We also had significant changes in the personnel, right? Former planning department heads and longstanding administrative staff have gone, and new, powerful, youthful, and contributive staff have taken place, but everyone manages in a different way, and sometimes like we don't know what we don't know, don't really know how things went before. So my opinion is that there's been kind of a drastic change in the way all of this is managed departmentally, financially, technologically, and beyond, and we just haven't really found our footing in the aftermath of this for the role of the treasurer. And I have harped on this several times over the years, And this conversation in particular has made me feel more passionate than I have in a while about it. But I just think really strongly that with help from Carly, ILEX, existing definitions, we should really work to reestablish that role, because I think it's an incredible loss to the commission to just discard the role and function of a treasurer. And I can say personally that in contrast, the years I've spent on the commission with a treasurer, I always felt better equipped to make financial decisions on behalf of the commission. I always felt better equipped to ensure we were maximizing the effect and impact that we could have on the community and projects, to ensure that resources weren't just lying in wait that we weren't even aware of. So I would really like to see us work together to kind of redefine that role and make it functional, because I can say that I believe Kelsey has formally and maybe even currently served as the treasurer, and a few others have taken the appointment. In fact, I think Carly herself was appointed the treasurer as a commissioner, and for the entirety of that time, I've watched the commission members really just struggle to find the direction and definition of what the expectations and like functional responsibilities of the role are. And I think it's been a loss. So, yep, that's what I have to say.
So, Carly, given Mr. Washburn's passion for this subject, how do we get help from town hall, or do we need to get help from town hall to work through our treasury challenges on this topic?
Yeah. Definitely we can help to look into these questions. And when the Conservation Commission is ready to make a decision, a public hearing is necessary in order to accept a new fee structure.
Okay,
So
it can't
you-
just be Concom business, it's gotta
No,
be,
you have to like place a legal ad and it's a public hearing.
I had no idea, okay.
Yeah.
But it would be good to also consider reestablishing a treasurer position, looking into how that is done, because I don't know procedurally how that
Do you
is
just,
done.
do you just nominate them?
Yeah, it's always been something that was nominated along with the other roles and appointed in the same fashion. And in the past, it seemed to be really left to the scheduling and availability of the active treasurer, and then the planning department head and the agent to find some time. And I think it was typically like quarterly, biannually even at times if things were busy, just to get together. And it was historically in person, but with all of our wonderful tech now, it could even be a remote collaboration. But they would get together like quarterly to talk about all the stuff we were describing. They would get insight into munis reports about available funds in the various accounts, and would be able to come back to the team with an update about funding availability, funding expense intentions, things that we'd already locked into, like recurring fees year over year that we are kind of already anticipating, right? So that was kind of,
Yeah, I think.
Carly, sorry, go ahead, Kelsey.
Just very briefly, I think it'd be great for the commission to be more informed and proactive. I feel like it's been rather reactive as of late, so I agree with you, Steve.
Yeah, I don't feel equipped or informed enough to make a decision on fees, because I don't know the implication of that decision, or the reduction in fees or increase in fees, whatever it becomes. Steve, a question for you is, are there other commissions that have a treasurer?
it's a good question. Carly could find out for us for sure.
I sure could.
I would be absolutely staggered to know, hey, I know if you were here in person, you would have just seen an indication in the room that we actually have a treasurer from another board present here tonight. So the answer to your question is yes, other boards do have treasurers.
Fascinating.
And I would say, if you care to hear more of my personal sentiment, because I've been spewing tonight, the gentleman that just identified himself as a treasurer would be a remarkable resource for us to take some cues from, if I could, So not in the moment, under pressure, but I think we should probably talk to, the individual I'm talking about is Mr. Greeley, Joe Greeley, and I think that we should probably include him in some of the discussion. I think any functional treasurer on another board probably could offer some pointers or some insight into what their functional role is, and we could maybe consider that in redefining or reestablishing the role of our own treasurer. And I do welcome, to something you said, Anil, I do welcome input from whether it's our town manager, who I deeply respect and appreciate, or other members of town staff, but I do have the opinion that it is largely our responsibility to define the role of our treasurer, with input from all of these parties, and beyond. Feel free to ask ChatGPT what a good treasurer does. Very cool. Okay, so I think that we were at a good tempo, and then this one really slowed us down for some thoughtful consideration here. I think some very clear next steps are the comparison that we described, right? Just looking at the proposed fee schedule to what towns like Dedham, to use Kelsey's example, are doing for a fee schedule. If we can resurrect the meeting minutes or other reference to it, I would like to see a comparison from the former fee schedule that we changed 5 or 6 years ago to what we're talking about now, because I almost wonder if we're going back to where we used to be, and perhaps that was right all along. Not sure. And then I think so those are sure shot ways forward to better inform ourselves on that front. And then other ways, because Anil is particularly touching on some of the funding considerations. Where's the money go? How's the money spent? Do we need this money? Do we not need this money? How much of that should even weigh into our considerations? So I think that relates to kind of the treasury role concern. And maybe in the short term or midterm, if we can get the comparisons that I described, the town to town and the historic to currently proposed comparisons on deck for consideration, maybe we can also talk about some of this treasury role stuff, get some input from Carly, from Ilex, from Sarah, from Mr. Mizuko himself, if you care to offer. I would encourage us to query to your point again, Anil, other treasurers like Mr. Greeley, who I think would serve as an incredible resource to get some sense of how they operate and serve their board. And then we could take it from there and see how we feel regarding our level of information and whether or not we're poised to make a decision or we want to continue to be considerate. Does that sound reasonable to everybody?
Yep.
This is a thick topic. I think it'll probably take a few sessions for us to jam through this, but we'll get there. Okay, let's try to keep the agenda moving if everyone is good with that topic. We have a number of community preservation related items that I certainly wish our CPC representative Catherine Walsh was here tonight to discuss,
Steve?
but I think Carly could.
One note, so if you look at the back of the agenda, the third item is the bylaw and regs.
Oh, okay. Norway Wetlands Protection Bylaws and Regulations. Sure, let's definitely not skip this one. Okay, line item number 3 is Norwood Wetlands Protection Bylaws and Regulations, not the CPC stuff. So my sentiment stands that I wish Catherine were here, but I think Carly will help us with CPC stuff. However, prior to that, we have a line item to discuss Norwood Wetland Protection Bylaws and Regulations. And Carly, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I've in particular requested this be added to an agenda in the aftermath of what I kind of perceived as a relatively tense hearing where some of the bylaws and regulations and their integrity or validity were questioned by the applicant and or their representative. I think Catherine Walsh had expressed some discontentment with the way all of that was navigated. And it left me feeling like while I think some members have been exposed to this and have been exposed to town council's opinions surrounding all of this, some members were here when these regulations and bylaws were crafted. We have an incredibly youthful body of our commission. And I think that some of us have not been present to hear the formal opinion of town council in that these bylaws and regulations have been reviewed, they're valid, they're enforceable, and they should be weighed in consideration of our decisions, and they should be enforced and upheld with the same level of merit, mettle, commitment as we uphold the state regulations that are set forth. So that was really the point of this. Carly did a great job of pulling a copy of former communication with town council and putting it in QNAP for review. That communication is focused fairly particularly on the intermittent stream facet of the bylaws and regs. So I think you can dive in here, Carly. Carly is working to get an updated memorandum of some sort expressing this opinion as I've described from town council, such that our newer members would have that confidence in levying their decisions, including our local bylaws and regs in that process, and that perhaps we could have something kind of on deck to distribute to applicants that have questions and concerns about the validity, such that they know they've been vetted, reviewed, and an opinion has been offered by town council in this realm. So I think that's everything I really wanted to say. Carly, I'm curious if like that aligns with what we've discussed and aligns with what you're kind of working to produce with town council.
It does. Yeah, yes.
Okay. So that's what I wanted to say about this, and that's why I asked for this agenda item to be put on the agenda tonight. I would encourage all of our commissioners, new and old, to review the materials that Carly prepared in the QNAP folder associated with town council's opinion. And I think I can speak for myself in saying that I look forward to any additional materials that can be provided to reinforce the validity of the bylaws and regulations, their applicability and when levying our decisions, and to have something at the ready so that when concerns are presented, as they have been in a recurring fashion over the hearings lately, we have something that we can provide physically in document from town council to try to diffuse some of those concerns. So, yeah, that's what's up. Any questions or comments about this? Okay, now we can move on to the CPC stuff on the agenda. So, typically Catherine Walsh would sort us with a CPC report and update, and I think would probably, has through email, contributed to the goals discussion. But Carly, would you do your best to help us navigate these next couple of agenda items so that we could try to make something of it still?
Sure. I won't touch on the CPC report because that's Catherine's.
Fair.
In terms of the CPC goals discussion, so Kalima, you said you had watched our last hearing, so we're talking about the Community Preservation Committee. And they have a round of grant applications in the fall, for example, in which people can apply for funds for proposed projects that meet the goals of the Community Preservation Act. And Kristen Phelps, who is the coordinator of Norwood's CPC program, came and spoke with us, as you saw, but she asked for input from the commissioners, conservation commissioners, about goals related to conservation work, whether it's climate resilience or what we were looking for, I guess what we would advise looking for in projects. How can a project meet some of these conservation goals? Both Catherine and Anil, thank you both, provided some input on what they would like to see, and I just wanted to touch base with the rest of the commissioners and see if any of you had additional goals you would recommend to the CPC. If you haven't provided them yet, if you could email them to me, and then I can share these with Kristen. That would be helpful. I know Kristen had wanted to apply them to the round of applications that they've received.
I think it's just so awesome that they were being considered like this, right? And that having their input welcome is great. And yeah, it makes me feel flattered as a commissioner that we're being thought of in this regard. And I had the opportunity when Carly and I spoke in advance of tonight's meeting, she shared the comments that Catherine and Anil offered. And quite frankly, I struggled to find something of value to add. So I encourage you guys, if you haven't, take a look at what Catherine and Anil provided. And if you can find something of merit to add to it, please do, because I was struggling. I think they had some very thoughtful considerations. So I just am super appreciative of the consideration for our commission in this capacity. I'm thankful that Anil and Catherine were so thoughtful in the ways that they were. And, yeah, I'm just excited that we get to be part of the metric and the decision-making that happens with these projects because of some of the stuff that gets funded out of community preservation.
Can you please share what Emil shared with you? Because I saw Catherine's email, but I believe as instructed, he just sent it to you.
Let's see.
Is there a date that we're hoping to have all this back by? Just kind of ASAP or?
Yeah. Hold on. Let's see. Can you read that from there?
Maybe the pain that just asked you to read it aloud for us.
Okay, goal 1, promote regular cleanup initiatives in open spaces and recreational areas. Goal, organize and support community cleanup events, particularly in parks, conservation lands, trails, and recreational spaces. Partner with local organizations, schools, and volunteer groups to ensure regular maintenance and litter removal. Rationale, keeping open and recreational spaces clean aligns with the plan's focus on enhancing the town's environment and making public spaces more accessible and enjoyable for all. Goal 2, install adequate waste disposal facilities in public spaces.
You can paraphrase, you don't have to
Okay.
go word for word.
Ensure that sites have sufficient trash bins and recycling stations for collection. Goal 3, launch public awareness campaigns on litter prevention.
I love the carry in, carry out, or I like to geocache a mill, and that reminded me of the trash in, trash out saying that's promoting
Yeah, I think,
geocaching environment.
The gist of it is really on, I get the theme. So to back up, I've been noticing in some of our close to our waterways that there's an abundance of trash, particularly around the one where I live. I think that's Hossbrook, or the waterway leading into Hossbrook. And in walking through sometimes Indian Park and places like that, I notice trash along some of the paths, and I think those pieces of trash do end up in our waterways, and I don't know what harm they cause at this point. I'm sure they do, but I do think that's the basis for why everything that you're reading in all the 5 goals are kind of focused on cleanliness and waste prevention.
I like it a lot. I think that we have periodically, and I think it typically surrounds like, forgive me for my jaded opinion, but I feel like in particular, like on Earth Day, we might have a local business step up and say, oh, can we do a cleanup? And that is appreciated. That's very cool and radical, but I think like to Emil's point, something like more consistent, more regular, trying to find an opportunity to engage with like, whatever it is, whether it's a cleanup a month or a quarter or something, and use our social media platforms and otherwise to promote that activity with the business so that there's some type of perceived like marketing return or otherwise, because there is a lot of resource committed to having your staff being paid or unpaid even and spending their time on an activity like this. So I liked a lot of what you said, Anil, and it kind of spurred thoughts like this when I was reading your notes, or really I think it was Kylie reading your notes to me, but yes, I liked what you had to say.
I think I've gone so far as to send Carly some pictures of places I've noticed garbage.
That's the way. That's the way. And I'm sure that she has a catalog of sites for potential future cleanups as well. That's great. Okay, so we'll review what we have. We'll be thoughtful and try to provide some additional considerations as soon as possible so those can be passed off to community preservation and integrated in their considerations. Very exciting.
That'd be great, thank you.
How about CPA applications surrounding Giles Pond, the Conservation Land Acquisition Fund?
We're waiting to hear about the status of those pre-applications, and if they are accepted as, being, potentially supportable by the CPC, then we'll submit the full applications of those. I think the deadline is November 15th. Is that correct? Yes, November 15th. So just to say, we're following up, we're keeping an eye on them, and we'll keep going.
Okay, diffuse 1 month.
Yeah.
A month, but gosh, when it comes to stuff like this, that's not a lot of time, right?
Yes.
Cool, okay. But generally, I think in the right direction, and I would just like take a moment to just mention my appreciation for the Sportsman's Association, their collaborative effort with us on the Guile Pond activities in particular. It's just been so exciting. I deeply appreciate that as an individual, a member of the community, someone that loves Guile Pond, and a member of the commission. So yeah, I think that's good stuff. What else?
Minutes to approve.
9:25. I missed this one, is that right? That's the one I wasn't here for?
Yes, that's true.
I still vote on this if I watch the recording or what? Otherwise, you might be in trouble with Kalina not here and only 2 voting members that are present. Could just wait till next time too.
Okay.
All right, so we'll wait to vote on that till next time when we have Catherine present. How about the agent update?
I will say that the ending greenhouse is constructed,
Thank goodness.
and
Fantastic.
yes. The students asked about maintenance of a path to the greenhouse so they can avoid getting poison ivy again, which they got while they were constructing the greenhouse. And the DPW has agreed to include that in their mowing when they mow every 3 to 4 weeks, and otherwise it'll be a volunteer-led mowing for mowing up to the greenhouse. Beyond that, the wetland replication and flood storage areas have been constructed and planted finally at Home Market Foods, so that's exciting.
Okay.
Been out to the site. We're expecting an as-built plan, but it's great to see that project sort of coming to a close. And that's about it. Just
Okay.
working hard. Things come up
Darn right.
all the time.
Darn right. I'll be the first to confess, I think you and I spent almost 2 hours reviewing all of the materials for this meeting, so you certainly are working hard. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of the agenda, and with that being said, I would ask for one more motion.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
I will.
You got beat to the punch, Janelle. All right, as with the remote and hybrid environment, I'll go down the list of Conservation Commission members and ask you to verbally state your position on this vote, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is in favor. Aye. Kalima Mustafa Woodberg.
Aye.
Anil Prasad.
Aye.
Kelsey Quinlan.
Aye.
Excellent, thank you for that.